Are you worried about the difficulty of getting into medical school? And if you do get in, are you worried about being hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt should you choose to study in the US, for example? Well, I found myself in both of these situations. As I said in my original video, I was not able to study medicine in South Africa, which is where I was born. And I ended up venturing to the US, where I did 1 year of pre-med, and I ended up needing to leave due to financial reasons. Luckily, I now find myself in Hungary at the University of Pécs, currently in 3rd year, which is exactly halfway through my studies. And that's just another small little benefit of studying medicine in Hungary. It is actually 6 years to gain your MD, as opposed to the US where it's 4 years of pre-med and then 4 years of med. So it's a total of 8 years to gain your MD. And on top of that, as I already mentioned, it is really expensive. So let's get into price, which I think is something a lot of people would be interested in. I currently pay around $17,000 a year to study medicine at the University of Pécs, which is a lot of money, but luckily I have been able to secure a loan, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the video. But for now, let's try and compare that to the US, just to give you an idea of how much money I'm actually saving. I was in Utah when I was in the US in a tiny little university called Southern Utah University, and I was paying roughly $22,000 a year at Southern Utah University for pre-med. So if you add that up over 4 years, you can do the math. And on top of that as well, when we were there, we had a little meeting where a bunch of universities in the area that would be offering medicine after pre-med came through to talk to the students and allowed us to ask them questions. So obviously I ended up asking how much it would cost. And this was the University of Utah. So it's not even a prestigious Ivy League university, no offense to the University of Utah, but they basically told me that for medicine, for international students, it's going to be upwards of $150,000 a year. So again, that over 4 years, you can do the maths. Altogether, you're going to be spending a ridiculous amount of money and you're going to be in a lot of debt. Hopefully, if you're watching this video and you're currently thinking of going to medical school, this will give you a little bit of insight into the situation and hopefully give you something to think about before you make your final decision. Even if you're someone who has currently got into a university in a more Western country that is, as I've mentioned, a lot more expensive, I still urge you to try and look into Eastern Europe and do some research and talk to some people or try and get in contact with some people, because there's not just the University of Pécs, you've got many options. You've got the University of Semmelweis in Budapest, you've got the University of Szeged, which is also in Hungary, you have Charles University in Czech Republic, there's also various medical universities in Poland as well, and all of these universities offer medicine in English at a much more reasonable price. Alright, so let's get a little bit into the system here in Hungary, specifically at the University of Pécs. I'll start with a little brief bit about the entrance examination. Unfortunately, I don't actually know much about it because I was granted exemption, which again is something that's cool to know. You can potentially get exemption from the entrance exam. I think it was as a result of my relatively good grades in high school and also doing a year of pre-med in the US. And when you're doing your university application, there's an option to apply for the entrance exam exemption, which I did and I was luckily granted. But if you have to go through the entrance exam procedure, from what I've heard from friends, you basically get given material that's very much biology and chemistry orientated. And then you have to obviously study that material and you'll have a oral, virtual online entrance exam where they'll basically ask you a bunch of questions on the material that you've studied and kind of analyze your base knowledge. And then you will get a mail in maybe 2 weeks' time, I'm not really sure the exact time period, letting you know your result, if you've got in or not. If you guys want more information about the entrance examination, let me know in the comments below and I can always do more research on it and then make it its own video should you guys feel the need for me to do that. Alright, so that's the entrance examination done. Now let's talk about what to expect if you get in. So as I mentioned, it's a 6-year degree and the first 2 years are very much theoretical. So this is where you basically have to go through a lot of departments in the university, such as the chemistry department, which starts with medical chemistry and goes all the way through until you finish with medical biochemistry. You also have the anatomy department, which is everything anatomy, histology, embryology. You also have to go through relative biology modules, so your molecular biology, and then there's a few additional ones. Oh, and also the physiology department, which I forgot for some reason. And there's probably a few others I forgot, but I think you've kind of got the rough idea. And yeah, so in these first 2 years, you're going to be ticking off all of these theoretical based subjects, and it's basically your first 4 semesters. And every semester is structured the same. So you have a 14-week instruction period and then a 7-week exam period, which is actually going to probably sound crazy to a lot of people who are watching this, because I think it's a very unique system in Hungary compared to other countries around the world. We actually have very few tests in this university, which is not normal for a medical school. A lot of the onus is put on us. So the more proactive you are with your studying, the better prepared you're going to be for the exam period, where in most cases you only have a final exam, and that final exam determines your grade. There are a few modules where you'll have some semester tests that can kind of grant you exemption for certain aspects of the final exam or give you a few bonus points. But in general, that final exam and the exam period is what determines your grade. And the majority of these final exams are actually oral exams, which is something that takes getting used to if you're not used to it. I came from South Africa where all of my exams were written exams, but you kind of get accustomed to it over time. There are still a few modules where there are written exams, but for the most part, they are oral. And yeah, I'm going to make a video at some point later on about how to tackle an oral examination. So I'm not going to really talk about that too much now. But that's just something to think about if you were to look into Eastern Europe. These first 2 years are pretty tough. I think the university uses the first 2 years as kind of a weeding out process to get rid of the people that aren't taking it too seriously. So you will get grilled in a few departments in your oral exams, and it's obviously not going to be pleasant at all times, but it's definitely rewarding. And I do feel that the system gives you a very good theoretical foundation that I don't think I would get in a different system. The pressure is so intense, and because it's an oral exam where you need to kind of know everything, because whatever topic you draw, that's what they use to determine how much you know. So you have to know everything equally well, and that seems really challenging, and it is really challenging, but at the end of the day, it's only going to be helpful for you as a doctor when you graduate. Okay, now it's time to address this getup. I'm sure all of you are wondering, what on earth is he wearing? Basically, after you've completed your first 2 years of theoretical subjects, you will have a white coat ceremony where everyone who has passed their theoretical subjects gets granted a white coat that has their name. And it basically signifies that you're now ready to go into your preclinical modules and start learning about what happens when something goes wrong in the human body. This is when we start learning about microbiology, pathology, pathophysiology, and we also have small opportunities to go into the clinic in subjects like internal medicine, where we start learning about the physical examination and just get a little bit of experience with patients. Third year is going to give you the foundation for your fourth and fifth years, which are your clinical years. This is where you're going to be spending a lot of time in the hospitals and the clinics, doing your clinical rotations, whether that be cardiology, neurology, gynecology, and so on and so forth. You'll also have some theoretical subjects such as pharmacology. We put pharmacology in fourth year. It used to be in third year, but it was too much for students, so it's been moved to fourth year. And then your sixth year is the rotational year, which is basically the year where you spend the majority of your time in the hospital and clinics and not much time in the university. You have a lot fewer exams, and everything's kind of leading up towards that final board exam, which is what you're going to need to get your certificate and to be granted the MD title. At this point, I do want to interrupt and give you some of the cons, because I think it would be remiss of me to make this whole video positive and not give you guys the other side of the story, so that you can really weigh up your options and get an idea of what you want to do. So obviously studying medicine in Hungary means you're going to encounter a lot of Hungarian speaking people in the hospital, some of which only speak Hungarian, and that can be very challenging. In our first 2 years, we do have a class called Medical Hungarian, which teaches us how to do a medical interview in Hungarian and also teaches us the common answers that patients tend to give. And it does help you, and it can definitely give you what you need to get by, but it's obviously very limiting. And unfortunately, I do feel like the practical skills that we gain from this university are not of the same level that you might get in other universities in different countries, which is something that does worry me a little bit. And it's something that I'm looking to try and make up for in our summer practices and rotational years. Because in this university, we have summer practices. At the end of second year, we have nursing skills for 3 weeks. At the end of third year, which will be at the end of the year I'm currently in, we have internal medicine for 4 weeks. And then end of fifth year, you have surgical. End of fourth year, you have surgery for 4 weeks. And then obviously a rotational year as well. All of these things can be done in neighboring countries that have an affiliation with this university. So that can definitely help you to potentially go and work with patients that speak the language that you can speak. And that is something that I'm looking to do. It is frustrating. This university does seem to have a little bit too much of a focus on the theoretical aspect of things. And it would be nicer if you could gain as much practical skills as you do theoretical in the university. But, you know, every university has got its cons. And in addition to that, I feel like I can also mention that most professors speak pretty good English, but you obviously have some select few that don't speak the best English, and then it can be quite hard to follow classes. But to be very honest, it hasn't happened to me in many subjects. It's maybe been 1 or 2. For the most part, the teachers are really good. It's just another thing to think about. All right, now I don't want to end the video on a bad note, so let me just go back to what I originally mentioned near the beginning of the video about the loan. So I mentioned that it's $17,000 a year to study medicine at the University of Pécs. And if you are a Hungarian or EU citizen, you are able to go through this company called Diakital. And Diakital has an agreement with the Hungarian government where Diakital, the company, will pay for your tuition fee every semester, and the Hungarian government will actually pay for the interest. So you have a 0% interest loan. And that is something that I am very grateful for, because we only have to start paying the loan back once we've graduated. And then the requirement is basically that you need to pay it off before you're 40 years old. And because there's 0% interest, it's literally just paying back what is owed. I do need to check up on it, whether the payments after you've graduated are monthly or yearly. I can't really remember, but I know that the repayments are based on Hungarian minimum wage. So it shouldn't be too difficult for you to cover once you have your resident doctor's salary. And you also have the option to pay it back faster if you decide to. But obviously, since there's that 0% interest, there really isn't much need to do so. So you can kind of take your time and just pay it off before you're 40, which I think is a very, very big positive. Unfortunately, if you're not an EU citizen, then you're not currently able to get this loan. But I'm not sure if the situation will change. As far as I'm aware right now, that is how it is. But again, if you compare the price here to the UK or America, you will still find that it is a lot more affordable. Okay, so there we have it. I hope you found this video informative. If you do have any additional questions, then don't be afraid to put them in the comment section below, and I will try and get back to you. And I can also make further videos in the future being more specific on certain aspects of what I've discussed today. But that is all for now. I'll see you guys on the next one. Cheers.